On the morning of June 6, 1944, over 24,000 Allied soldiers landed on the beaches of Normandy for the largest seaborne invasion in history, known as Operation Neptune, which was of Operation Overlord. These invasions went into planning a whole year in advance, beginning in 1943, and would be the planned attack known as D-Day. It was the moment every soldier was waiting for. At last, the supreme moment has come. The months and years of waiting are over. Troops of the United States, the British Isles, Dominions, contingents from occupied but unconquered countries in Europe are at this moment setting foot on the continental soil. The men who left Dunkirk nearly 4 years ago are returning, said New York Times article Invasion. The main focus was a 50-mile radius of Normandy's coast, which was divided into 5 different code-named sectors: Utah, Gold, Juno, Sword, and Omaha Beach. The Allies' primary objective was to liberate mainland Europe from Nazi Germany, which would give them a major advantage in the war if they succeeded. One sector involved in the invasions by the Allied forces on D-Day that is more well known and famous today is the invasion of Omaha Beach. This invasion was one of the more famous primarily because it was where American assault troops met their stiffest German opposition in the invasion of France, said in the Christian Science newspaper. This beach was also the toughest because it stretched for over 6 miles alone, between the fishing port of Port-en-Bessin on the east and the mouth of the Vire River on the west. Soldiers from the 29th Infantry and 1st Infantry Divisions began the invasions on Omaha Beach. However, many drowned from deep water when departing from the U-boats or were killed instantly from defending German soldiers. The first soldiers to arrive were U.S. Army soldiers led by Omar Bradley, which were expected to arrive at 6:30 a.m. and were planned to have armored vehicles like the amphibious Sherman tanks for protection and guidance while moving up the beach towards the firing Germans. However, the vehicles and tanks never made it. Supposedly, they were released a distance away from the beach and sank after being swamped with water shortly after departing from their landing crafts. Not only was that the problem, though, many units were also landing in the wrong positions by their landing crafts due to high winds and tides, which caused many issues such as confusion and where and what to do when landing. Cliffs overlooking the beach where the Germans had set up position were the only way off the beach. Many soldiers led by the Army Rangers sprinted for the cliffs without any cover immediately after departure, which for many were gunned down and blown into pieces. For those who did make it to the cliffs and were alive, attacked the German gun emplacements, which took the Germans' concentration off the U.S. soldiers landing on the beach and focused more primarily on the soldiers slowly attacking from the cliffs. This allowed for more U.S. soldiers to make safer landings and gain better positions for fighting. By midday, the Germans' resistance had been lessened, and by nightfall, the Americans had gained full control of the beach. Omaha Beach is most remembered for the casualties suffered. Over 2,400 Americans had either been killed or wounded on this beach alone in less than a day. However, 34,000 soldiers had been landing on this beach by the end of the day, and it would not have been for the brave, courageous soldiers that risked their lives and put their lives in front of unloading German fire so that their friend beside them would live. Another sector involved in Operation Neptune that was fairly well known for its invasion was Sword Beach, which played a big part in the Allies' advancement. "We will accept nothing less than full victory," said General Dwight D. Eisenhower in Los Angeles Times Invasion. This beach stretched about 5 miles across, and the main focus of the invasion was to capture Caen, the capital of northern France's Lower Normandy region. Caen was so important because all the main roads in the region ran through this city, which sustaining control of these would be major in the Allies' advancements of the east and west. However, the Germans wouldn't give up this territory without a fight. What was different about Sword Beach than other sectors like Omaha was that the beach was lightly defended. The Germans used artillery in place of defending the beach with soldiers and guns. 5 miles from the beach to the east, the Germans used 75mm heavy caliber guns at the Merville Gun Battery, a coastal fort in Normandy, part of the Atlantic Wall used by the Germans to defend continental Europe from Allied invasion. 20 miles from the beach to the east at Le Havre, a major port in northern France's Upper Normandy region, the Germans had a 150mm gun set up. 8 miles inland from the beach, they also had 88mm guns ready. Sword Beach and everyone on it could have been blown to pieces if the Germans had used their artillery advantage, but luckily they had not. Units from the British Second Army, led by Lieutenant General Miles Dempsey, and troops from the British First Corps, led by Crocker, started the invasion at 7:25 a.m. Soon into the attack, paratroopers from the 3rd and 5th Parachute Brigades landed on the beach to assist the ground troops in battle. Sword Beach was beginning to look as an easy victory for the Allies until the Germans had launched their only counterattack later that day on June 6th. British troops at Sword were unable to find and group with the Canadian troops at Juno, another beach in Operation Neptune, which resulted in them being vulnerable to German troops. Men from the German 21st Panzer Division and the 192nd Panzer Grenadier Regiment attacked and regained victory of Sword Beach by 8 p.m. However, the counterattack did not last long because the Germans' vehicles, men, and equipment were in clear sight of Allied tanks at Sword and aerial fighter jets, which soon swept in and regained territory. By the end of the day, over 29,000 Allied troops had been landing on Sword and only 630 casualties were recorded. Sword Beach was a major victory and the Allied invasions that day were looking successful. So far, the commanders who are engaged report that is everything proceeding according to plan, and what a plan, said in Stephen E. Ambrose's The Climactic Battle of World War II. Both Omaha and Sword Beach were won as long as the 3 other beaches, Utah, Gold, and Juno, by the Allies. The entire Battle of Normandy lasted not even 3 months, from June 1944 to August 1944. The victory brought forth the Allied liberation of Western Europe from Nazi control and marked the beginning to the end of the war in Europe. The major victory caused many blows to the Nazis, such as psychological problems, which prevented Hitler from sending troops from France to build up his Eastern Front against the advancing Soviets, which soon led to the unconditional surrender of the Nazis on May 8, 1945, and a week before, on April 30th, the suicide of Adolf Hitler in his funeral bunker by Berlin by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Some spectacular facts about D-Day was that it was the most heavily guarded secret on the entire planet at the time, and the largest invasion still to this day. The waiting for history to be made was the most difficult. I spent much time in prayer. Being cooped up made it worse. Like everyone else, I was seasick and the stench of vomit permeated our craft, said by Private Claire Galdonic, 359th Infantry Regiment, U.S., 90th Division in the Wisconsin Magazine of History. It is also estimated that nearly 2 million soldiers, sailors, and airmen were involved in Operation Overlord, whom included U.S., British, and Canadians. With this many soldiers being active in battle, the U.S. shipped 7 million tons of supplies, and 448,000 of that was ammunition alone. There is one great thing that you men will all be able to say after this war is over, and you are home once again. You may be thankful that 20 years from now, when you are sitting by the fireplace with your grandson on your knee and he asks you what you did in the Great World War II, you won't have to cough, shift him to the other knee, and say, "Well, your granddaddy shoveled shit in Louisiana," said General George S. Patton, Jr. to his troops in New York Times waiting to strike. With this many men, over 17 million maps were used to guide each unit and for which played a huge role in liberating each beach of Operation Neptune. However, even though the U.S. had successfully liberated and gained victory of each of the 5 sector beaches, hundreds of thousands of men were killed in the process. Airmen alone flew over 140,000 missions within a 3-month period and lost over 12,000 men and over 2,000 aircrafts in warfare. 120 of these were lost on D-Day, and about 28,000 airmen were lost by the very end of the Normandy campaign. Roughly 10,000 American ground troops were also lost on D-Day, Utah Beach, 197 killed. On Omaha Beach, 2,000 killed. Gold Beach, 413 killed, and on Juno Beach, 1,204 killed. Sword Beach, 630 lives were lost. At the American Cemetery at Colleville-sur-Mer in northwestern France, there are 9,386 American buried, 307 of which contain the remains of unknown soldiers. At the same cemetery, there are 1,557 soldiers that are named at the Garden of the Missing, for those who were never found. At the Bayeux Cemetery in Normandy, 4,868 British are buried, and 1,837 men are classified as never found. Lastly, at Le Camp in Bayeux, France, 21,500 Germans are buried. There's a graveyard in northern France where all the dead boys from D-Day are buried. The white crosses from one horizon to the other. I remember looking over and thinking it was a forest of graves. But the rows were like this, dizzying, diagonal, perfectly straight. So after all, it wasn't a forest but an orchard of graves. Nothing to do with nature, unless you can count human nature, said Barbara Kingslover in D-Day and Geography. Over 150,000 Allied soldiers had contributed to one of the greatest days still in history today, D-Day. Men left their families and home life to sacrifice and put their lives on the line for their country. Courageous, brave, and daring, just some words to describe these heroic men that fought on these bloodbath beaches of Normandy. What these men had done for this country and for the world will never be forgotten and will never be taken for granted.